Hey everyone, thanks for joining me to talk about pain. And I'm going to try something a little bit different today. Um, I am recording this podcast as a video because there's going to be some uh, visuals that I'm going to use to help explain my take on plantar fasciitis, what's going on. And I think it would be helpful for people to see what I'm talking about rather than just hear it described. And if you can't watch it on this will be on YouTube. If you can't watch it on YouTube, I'll try and explain everything that I'm talking about as well as I can so you can understand where everything's coming from an audio standpoint too. But a video might give you more insight as to what I mean. So I'm responding to an article printed in the New York Times. Plantar fasciitis is, well, a real huge pain. And this was written by Danny Blum, D-A-N-I, and the last name Blum, B-L-U-M. And this article interviews several doctors and I think even a physical therapist about, plantar fasciitis and, what to do about it. How are we going to talk about plantar fasciitis? Well, plantar fasciitis pain is typically characterized by when you get up out of bed in the morning and the bottom of your foot is painful to walk on, especially for the first few steps. That might go away eventually. And then, it might go away for the day, and then in the afternoon, usually often becomes a dull ache later on. So that's plantar fasciitis. And what is the plantar fascia? Well, on the bottom of the foot here, so here's a foot, there's a tissue that runs from the heel bone here, hard to see, from the heel bone here to the balls of the feet. It's called the plantar fascia. Now, deep to that is another muscle called the flexor digitorum brevis that pretty much mirrors the plantar fascia. What is its role? Well, its role is to help create a spring so that when we walk on our foot, our arch springs down and then it springs back up again. So the plantar fascia is a pretty tough tissue of fascia that helps with this. I mean, you can imagine because, I mean, there are studies that show up to like 5 times our body weight is passing through the foot with every step that we take. So you need something pretty strong there to help spring the foot back again and help absorb and disperse the force that's coming through the foot. Okay, so that's the plantar fascia. And then plantar fasciitis, any kind of itis is basically pain or inflammation of a tissue. Itis means inflammation. So tendinitis is a tendon that's inflamed. Bursitis is a bursa that's inflamed. So itis doesn't really tell anything about why that tissue is inflamed. It's just identifying the specific tissue that is inflamed. All right, so in the article, what they talk about, and it's a well-written article. However, the problem, it says right off the bat, doctors aren't sure about the precise mechanisms that cause plantar fasciitis. And, these are all doctors who are, specialists and professors and so forth. So, they have a lot of credentials behind them. Let's see, and it says no one is safe from plantar fasciitis. Well, so here it is. Doctors aren't sure why it's happening. No one is safe from plantar fasciitis, and they're not really sure how to treat it, is the gist of the article. And so that to me just leaves people feeling like, well, what do I do? I mean, they offer some light stretching and, ice roll for the foot and for the bottom of the foot, filling up a water bottle with water, freezing it, and then roll it on the bottom of the foot, stretching the calves, wearing insoles, things like that. Based on reading this article, you would think that it's just luck or not whether you get plantar fasciitis, and it's just luck or not whether you can recover from it. So I wanted to talk to you about my perspective on why, because I've been pretty successful treating plantar fasciitis, and I think I understand a little bit about why it's happening and how to solve it. So it's important because what was really interesting is my wife has suffered from plantar fasciitis in the past. She is a chef, was on her feet all day long, and she developed plantar fasciitis. And it was really tough to get it to go away with her. It turns out that she also developed heel spurs, and I'll talk to you about that connection, my theories about the connection between plantar fasciitis and heel spurs too. But she pretty much developed heel spurs and had to have really aggressive sonic treatments to the heel spurs to break those up, and that really helped her. And then she had a special orthotic developed for her to unload that point. And we'll talk all about that in just a second. First of all, I wanted to talk about what my take is on why plantar fasciitis is happening, because if you understand why it's happening, you'll understand the solutions. But what I was going to say is that my wife also read this article and she thought it was a great article. And so I questioned her about, why did you think it was so great? And she said, well, because it was really like my experience. If I walk on, because it mentions in here, don't walk on hard wooden floors, wear shoes with lots of cushion in it, all sorts of things to help your plantar fasciitis. So she and I were looking at it from two different perspectives. I was looking at it from my PT point of view, that understanding the sources of why it was being developed, and she was looking at it from a patient who's had it point of view, confirming that, oh yeah, every time I walk on a wooden floor, it really starts to set off my plantar fascia. So we're going to get into that. She's looking at it from more of an acute issue. So talking to her helped me reframe how I was thinking about this article. So this article is written about and for people with more acute cases of plantar fasciitis who have it right now. And so I'm thinking about, of course, not only how to solve the acute case, but all the factors that are leading up to that, and how to conduct your life after you resolve from the plantar fasciitis. So I've got a little bit broader perspective. So let's dig into it and talk about my take on plantar fasciitis. So as I already went over, the plantar fascia is on the bottom of the foot. It helps the foot arch spring back. Now, what's going on with plantar fasciitis is that typically this is caused by tight calf and soleus muscles. So what happens is when we walk, our knee needs to travel over the foot. And when the calf and soleus muscles are tight, that is restricted. And so if any of you have ever accidentally run into a table or a wall, even just taking a half step or a step, you'll recognize that your body is generating significant forces in order to move forward. If you run into something or another person, it's like getting tackled by a linebacker, all right? Your body is generating a lot of forces. Well, those forces have to go somewhere. Your ankle is trying to bend. And by the ankle bending, it's helping to disperse the forces of the forward movement of your body. And it does this because then if the ankle can bend, it's dispersing the forces along the whole calf and soleus complex, which is massive, by the way. And it's also dispersed among all the foot bones, 26 of them, and the ankle joints. So this is the body's way of attenuating the force, and then the plantar fascia also allows the foot to arch to collapse, and then it springs back up. All right, this is how it's ideally supposed to happen. But when we have a tight calf and soleus muscle, that force, that ability for the ankle to bend is slightly restricted. And so that force that should be moving into bending of the ankle, now because it's blocked, that force has to go someplace. And in cases of plantar fasciitis, it's going down into the foot. So the force is then translated into a downward force into the foot. Well, what's guarding the downward force of the foot is the plantar fascia. All right, so now you've got more force that's translating down into the foot, that's flattening the arch excessively. And so that starts to, over time, will irritate that plantar fascia because it's being asked to do too much. And so anytime you have a tendonitis issue, plantar fasciitis, again, is just itis, inflammation. Most inflammatory conditions or tissues in the body are inflamed because of overuse. Not because they're weak, but because they're overused for some reason. Because some bigger player up the chain or down the chain isn't doing its job correctly and translating all of that force into a smaller tissue that's a supporting player. It's not meant to be the leading player. And the plantar fascia is one of those. So now we've got excessive forces pushing forward that's being translated down into the foot, and I described this in my foot pain book. And so eventually that plantar fascia is going to say, hey man, I just can't do this anymore, and it's going to start to get irritated, and that's when we start to get plantar fasciitis. So how do I know this? Well, from treating a lot of cases of plantar fasciitis, You know, once I solve the calf and soleus tightness issue, plantar fasciitis goes away and it stays away permanently. So so why doesn't calf stretching then work? Because calf stretching is done during the daytime and it will stretch the calf and soleus muscle. That's ultimately what we need to do is lengthen this. But then what happens is, and this is what perplexed me as a physical therapist, I'm just like, okay, these people are doing their calf stretches, but the next day it's tight again. What's going on here? Why is the calf and soleus muscle getting so tight all the time? And I finally realized it's because of how we sleep. And so when we sleep and we're lying on our back, the foot is pointed away like this, and maybe the covers are on top of it. And so the calf and soleus muscle is in a shortened position for 6 to 8 hours a week. And the same goes for if we sleep on our sides, most people point their feet away like this, which then is shortening the calf and soleus muscle. If you're a stomach sleeper, well, then the bed is pointing your foot away and causing that to happen. Now, in some people, if you're lying on your side, for instance, this is an active contraction that's happening all night long. So your brain has learned to contract these muscles while you're sleeping. Okay. Now, in the article, they pointed out that this plantar fasciitis happens a lot when people start to have an uptick in their activities. For instance, you know, if you up your miles running or if you suddenly develop a training program, well, all of those activities are starting to engage the calf and soleus more. And if you're already prone to having a shortness in those muscles, now you're adding another layer of contraction on top of it because muscle tone is contraction of muscle. So now you've added more contraction on top of an already shortened system. So this is why it's happening. And then people who, the article also mentions that a lot of people develop it if they've been sitting too long. Well, a lot of people when they're sitting, the chairs are often too high for most people. And so their feet are slightly rested down. Or they have high heels on, which then bring the heel up and the toes down, which shortens the calf and soleus. Or they just have tennis shoes with really thick heels on them, which again allow the calf and soleus to remain shortened all day long. And then they start to develop, and maybe there's some weight gain or some other things that are aggravating factors, but the system becomes shortened here. And so all the force of moving forward then is again translated down into the arch of the foot, into the plantar fascia. And that's why it's becoming irritated. So if you're not getting the clue already, the solution is to fix the sleeping behavior. And then also, fix your ergonomic behavior. If you're sitting like this all the time, this is contributing to your shortening. So just simply put something underneath your foot to make that longer. And then as your plantar fascia resolves, you can actually have have the heel lower than the foot, and that will help naturally lengthen the calf and soleus muscle. However, making that change too soon in the process of healing might aggravate it because it's too much of a stretch, especially if you're working 6 to 8 hours sitting down like this. It's a long time to stretch something that's been short suddenly, and you're adding load to it because your weight is on the ball of the foot. So, and especially if this area is contracted, now it's working in a lengthened position against a force that it's not used to doing, and that's also a recipe for irritation or Achilles tendonitis too. So a lot of you probably already see where I'm going with this, is that sleeping will be the key to solving plantar fasciitis, especially because the foot, remember those first few steps that you take in the morning and you get that tearing, painful sensation? It's because the foot, everything has retightened now. And now suddenly you're standing on, it's been like this if we're looking at it in a vertical position. It's been like this for 6 to 8 hours, and suddenly you stand in it and boom, you're expecting it to all of a sudden lengthen, and all of that force is transmitted down into the plantar fascia again. So this is why those first few steps in the morning are particularly painful, is because you've had all of this shortening all night long, and then boom, you have all of this force in the morning. Okay, so I have a foot and ankle program that I've created that solves plantar fasciitis and a lot of lower body issues, ankle, foot, Achilles tendon, all sorts of things like that. And one of the hallmarks of it is that I ask you to start wearing a dorsal night splint. Well, a dorsal night splint keeps the foot in a neutral position. You don't need to sleep with the foot in a lengthened position. That's going to be so incredibly irritating to do that. I mean, even just sleeping with the foot in a neutral position is irritating for a lot of people. Why? Well, either this whole system has become shortened, and so that this is a major stretch just to have the foot in a neutral position. Or what I found, a lot of people with plantar fasciitis or chronic foot and ankle issues, this is actually an active contraction that they're doing at night that they're not aware of. And so even wearing the dorsal night splint in a neutral position, these muscles are pushing against that dorsal night splint, and it's like doing sustained exercise for 6 or 8 hours. That muscle starts to get burning and it's uncomfortable, and then they end up kicking it off in the middle of the night. And I can't tell you how many people report that I tried wearing the dorsal night splint, and when I woke up the next morning, it was off, and I saw it across the room. Well, what they're doing is waking up in the middle of the night and kicking off the dorsal night splint because it's so painful. Why is it painful? It's because they have an active contraction of their calf and soleus muscle. Unfortunately, you will have to break this habit. This is what's the root of causing the plantar fascia for you. Wearing the dorsal night splint and for shorter periods of time and then building up to all night long will be the answer for you. So in order to make it most effective for you, most people get up in the middle of the night to pee. So I ask them to, don't put on the dorsal night splint when you go to bed. Instead, put it on after you go pee, and then you'll have the last half or last third of the evening with your foot in a lengthened position, and then when you get up the next morning, this should feel a lot better to weight bear on the plantar fascia. This change will happen very rapidly. So within a week, you should feel significant relief. And you should also notice that you're able to wear the dorsal night splint a little bit longer each time. And in my program, I show you the type of dorsal night splint that I typically recommend for people. All right, so this is why I believe plantar fasciitis is happening. And, this will get into a little bit, all of these doctors that have been interviewed are certainly much more intelligent than I am. And the problem, the reason why they don't understand this type of approach to solving plantar fasciitis is not because I'm smarter than they are or anything like that. It's just because of their medical training. And this is our training in medicine in general is component thinking. What they are concerned about is looking very intently at that plantar fascia and trying to treat that plantar fascia. But the plantar fascia is responding to a larger systemic problem. And that's not how we're trained in medicine to think about these types of things. And so, that's why they're unsuccessful and don't understand why plantar fasciitis is occurring, is because they're only looking at plantar fasciitis from the standpoint of your plantar fascia. And so their solutions are treating the plantar fascia, but not the system that is causing it in the first place. And so anyway, that's my take on why people are kind of not getting the answers that they need. And when I read this article, I mean, it's 2023, and really, we still don't understand why plantar fascia is occurring. We do. It's just not, they're just not seeing these kinds of answers because of their training. They're very intelligent and great doctors, but they're not trained to think in a systems standpoint. All right. So this is what I believe is happening with plantar fasciitis. And frankly, I'll tell you, when we solve this, it goes away, and it can go away very rapidly. Now, there are other issues further up the chain that are also contributing to calf and soleus tightness too, and I address that in my program. And then the other thing that I do is, in the meantime, until this excessive force issue is solved, you're going to have irritation to that plantar fascia. So I've developed a unique taping technique to unload the plantar fascia, and which helps it calm down really rapidly while you're fixing this issue too. And then once this issue is fixed, the calf and soleus tightness, then you can wean yourself from the tape. Most people who I've treated with plantar fasciitis have recovered within 1 to 2 weeks. With the really stubborn cases, it might take a couple months. But certainly within 1 or 2 weeks, they feel a significant change. It's just that it might take the rest, a couple months more to finally get 100% better. That last sometimes 10 or 20% of getting better is the hard part for people. Why? Because there are other habits other than just a tight calf and soleus that are contributing to it, and we have to kind of drill down into specifically how they're using their foot, ankle, and lower body system. All right. Now, I just wanted to take a moment, since we're talking about this whole system. This is why I believe heel spurs are occurring too. It's the same type of problem. So this is what, some people will develop extreme plantar fasciitis. Some people will develop heel spurs. Some people will develop Morton's neuromas or any other type of irritation to posterior tibialis or peroneal tendonitis and all sorts of things around the ankle and muscles, Achilles tendonitis. So it's the same system of problems. It's just manifesting differently in different people based on their genetics, how loose their ligaments are. Are they an exerciser? Are they not an exerciser? What are their ergonomics like? What kind of shoes do they wear? All that kind of stuff. All right. So the heel spurs, which is what my wife had, you're going to need to fix this system, and this is what helped her. But she had such severe heel spurs, she needed to have this sonic treatment to break up the heel spur. And then what they did is she was given an orthotic that had a negative space in where the heel spur was to unload it. Now, for you at home, the cheap way to do this is just get one of those gel pads at Walmart or Walgreens or something like that, and you'll see a heel cup. Well, what I have my patients do is I just have them cut a hole in the heel cup where their heel spur pain is, and now that spur isn't coming in contact with the shoe anymore, and it will start to allow the heel spur to heal, no pun intended. But that contact is irritating. It's already an irritated and traumatized area, and any rubbing or anything like that on it, no matter how much you're fixing the whole system, that irritation has been set up and you've got to unload that. And so a little hole in the heel cup will really help unload that heel spur. Morton's neuromas, same thing, solve the system and you'll solve the Morton's neuroma. That should melt away pretty rapidly too. Again, the taping seems to be a big deal for a lot of these cases because this whole system is so broken. It can't be fixed quickly enough, and by the time your body has reacted with some kind of chronic tendonitis or heel spur or Morton's neuroma or some other issue, you're kind of in a deep hole. And so you need to have these more extreme solutions to solve it. Okay, now, so that's dealing with it from more of an acute standpoint. Now, from a long-term standpoint, so this is what in the article, it talks about, wearing really, stable shoes, really puffy shoes, and never go barefoot walking on a hardwood floor, all that kind of stuff. Well, I tend to disagree from a long-term standpoint. From an acute standpoint, that makes perfect sense. You don't want to irritate something that's already irritated. But if you want to keep this stuff away from a long-term perspective, walking barefoot or in socks on a floor will help you naturally lengthen your calf and soleus muscle because your heels are no longer higher than the forefoot. The heels being higher than the forefoot is one of the things that's contributing to the shortness in this system already. So yes, you want to gradually lower your shoe to a 0 grade shoe or a minimalist shoe once you've solved your pain. And walking around in shoes that have minimal elevation in the heel will help maintain the length that your calf and soleus need. Now, this may take a while for you to train yourself to do that, but you can certainly do it. And that's what I would recommend is definitely start walking around bare feet. Because if you walk, you'll notice that if you walk barefoot versus having a shoe on, your gait pattern is different. Your foot strikes differently. And so this is going to help lengthen this whole system in a more natural way. So start integrating, maybe I'm going to walk around on my bare feet for 2 minutes, once I solve all my pain a day. And then, in a couple weeks, I might be up to 10 minutes, and then I might be up to a half hour, and so on and so forth, until you can walk around all day in your bare feet on hard surfaces. And it won't be a problem because you've been solving and fixing one of the causes of it, which are the high heels that are contributing to the shortened calf and soleus complex. So I just wanted to draw that distinction. In the article, they're talking about short-term acute issues, but now we're into a long-term solution. Once your pain is gone, then you want to start making other changes that allow this calf and soleus complex to stay long for a long, permanently. And minimalist shoes are great for that, or barefoot walking on hard surfaces once everything is healed. Okay, so hopefully that helps you understand my take, at least, on plantar fasciitis, heel spurs, other things like Morton's neuromas, peroneal tendonitis, posterior tibialis, Achilles tendonitis, all sorts of things like that are ultimately caused by the system's failure. And it's just manifesting as different problems in different people's feet for a variety of different reasons. I hope this helps you solve your case of plantar fasciitis. I know it can be frustrating, especially when you read articles like this that offer basically no hope. There is hope, and it's understanding things and operating from more of a systems approach rather than this component thinking that your practitioners have been approaching you with. All right, thanks and good luck.